Just for lack of time, I'm gonna move past the giveaway for this round, just so we get Nico on, because Nico's hanging out in the background. But let's see, Dan and Nico. There we go. How's it going, Nico? What's going on? Let's see. You're muted. Hold on a second. That's me. Go ahead, Nico.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
All right.
That was all me.
Hey, Dan.
How's it going, man?
Good. How's Astropalooza going so far?
It's, you know what, with very minor bumps in the road. The 18 days of setup actually, kind of helped a little bit. But appreciate you coming on and hanging out with us and talking a little bit about light pollution and filters. And it's going to be awesome to have you on. But thank you so much for the support. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. I mean, and I was thinking through all the different kinds of topics I could do, and for some reason this one just sort of jumped out at me. It's going to be a pretty basic, sort of short presentation, so hopefully I can get some questions in and answer more specifics about filters, because it's something I've reviewed a bunch of different filters, so I sort of have a breadth of knowledge about using them both with DSLRs and astro cameras.
Awesome, great. So whenever you're ready to jump in, go right on in. Everybody knows who you are. You want to talk about nebula photos a little bit, and then just jump on in.
All right, the screen there?
Yep, I'm going to make you solo in a second, and there you go. You're full screen, and you're good to go.
All right. So yeah, thanks again. So my idea here is, I think I have a video on this, I'm sure, too, but I just want to talk a little bit about the basics of light pollution and filters, and hopefully clear up any little misconceptions that I see out there. And then at the end, I'm going to just describe a really simple test that anyone can do with a new filter you bought, and just to see what it's actually doing with your setup. All right. So I don't have a traditional astronomy background. I studied filmmaking as an undergrad, and then library science for grad school. But when I discovered astrophotography, I was 30 years old, and I just immediately fell in love with it. I became intensely interested in the entire hobby and astronomy more generally. And I had a great club at that time in Delaware, where I had a lot of mentors in sort of the astro imaging section of that club. And so I really focused on astrophotography over the past 7 or 8 years, and started this YouTube channel where I'm able to share tutorials and reviews and things like that. It's expanded a little bit. When I first started, I was sort of thinking of it more just as like a DSLR kind of channel, but now I've done all kinds of different things with it, but I still do have a soft spot for DSLR astrophotography. So this is me with my first setup. It's just a photo tripod. This was a tracker that was popular at the time called the AstroTrack. It was made in the UK. I think they actually have released a new version of it now, but it's still not hugely popular in the US. But this original one was interesting because it was basically a souped up barn door tracker, so you did need to rewind it every half hour. Or every half hour, maybe every 2 hours, something like that, but it was a little inconvenient. But anyways, the reason I showed this is because when I jumped into astrophotography, I immediately thought, okay, well, if I'm going to be doing this in a Bortle 8 sky, I'm going to need a light pollution filter. So right away, I had a light pollution filter, and it was a CLS clip-in into my stock DSLR, and I didn't know any better if that was a good idea or not. But I had a great amount of fun with it. And then it was a few years after I was in the hobby that I was seeing all this discussion online about, like, don't use light pollution filters. So when I got going with YouTube, I decided, well, one thing I want to try is actually testing more rigorously what do light pollution filters do, and do they actually work? I mean, that might seem like a silly question, but it's actually a question that I see popping up all the time. I think that one of the reasons this question pops up all the time, is maybe people are misled into thinking that filters are the end all and be all, that they can do anything, that they can somehow just block the light pollution and the light pollution only. But the truth is that using a filter is always going to be a trade-off, because we're blocking light. So that means we're blocking some light that we don't want. That's the light pollution. But we might also be blocking light that we do want in the colors of the stars and things like that. The main thing that a light pollution filter does, the way that it improves a photo, is increasing contrast. So by darkening the sky, the deep sky objects can pop out a little bit more. But it's that trade-off between increasing contrast but also messing with the color balance and the color variety in your photo. Because if you imagine a certain color is blocked by the filter, that means that it never reaches your sensor. So you've literally not captured it, and you can never recover it. So what I want to sort of jump into now is how do light pollution filters work, because I think that by going into this, we'll understand that how they work is sort of it will hopefully clear everything up. That's what I was trying to say. A digital camera is designed to sort of match the way that our eyes. So a digital camera, as we know from something like the James Webb, can capture infrared. But the digital cameras that we buy off the shelf are concerned with visible light, because visible light is what our eyes can record. So the camera already has a filter installed that blocks the ultraviolet and infrared light from reaching the sensor. And the reason it does this is sort of twofold. One is that it's much easier to get a pleasing color balance that matches what we see if you're blocking the infrared and ultraviolet. But then also, it's much easier for lens designers to be able to focus all these different wavelengths at the same time if you're not including the infrared and these other things. If you do include the infrared, most lenses are not going to be able to focus the infrared and the visible light at the same time. And so in terms of astrophotography, what happens if you're using like a full spectrum camera is, and you don't block the infrared with something like an IR cut filter, is you get this ring of unfocused infrared light around your stars. So what a filter does is it blocks some colors. This is a typical light pollution filter in that it's blocking most of the green, all of the yellow, and most of the orange. So this would be like a CLS filter, one that just has one big notch. And all of the other colors, so some of your green, all of your blues and indigo and reds still get passed through, but it's blocking all of that yellow and orange. So this is a chart for a common CLS filter. CLS stands for City Light, and it was designed this way specifically because until LEDs started taking over with nighttime lighting, a lot of the nighttime lighting, artificial light, was amber colored. So these kinds of filters, a CLS filter, was pretty effective at blocking the artificial lighting sources. But even back then, let's say, when most streetlights were amber colored, if the main thing that you were in shooting was the Milky Way, a CLS filter wouldn't work very well. It would be the best choice, because the Milky Way is a broad emitter, and that means that emission is happening in all parts of that visible spectrum. And so if we were blocking the oranges and yellows and all of that, we would lose out on a lot of this beautiful warmth, the golds, the yellows, browns, and orange colors that the Milky Way is made up of, because it's all these individual stars, G stars and K stars and M stars. And that's true of not just our Milky Way galaxy, but any galaxy. They're all broad emitters that have all these different colors of stars. And so if that's your focus in an astrophoto, you wouldn't want to use this kind of filter that's blocking all of those colors of light. So what kind of objects do work really well with light pollution filters? Well, objects that emit light strongly at very particular frequencies. And the most common example of this are emission nebulae. Emission nebulae are glowing gases with their own special kind of light at these very particular known wavelengths called emission lines. And that allows us to isolate them with these filters so we can block light pollution but still get all of the light from the emission nebulae. This works very similarly. The concept of an emission nebula you can think of in the same way as a neon sign. A neon sign is just a gas trapped in a glass tube, and then the atoms in that gas are being ionized, meaning they're excited, and that's done by running electricity through them. In the case of an emission nebulae, the atoms in the gas cloud are excited by something going on out there. Usually the birth of a star, when we say a stellar nursery, or the death of a star, like in the case of a supernova remnant. And there's these well-known, probably everyone on the call knows this, these well-known gases that emit at particular frequencies that we like to capture. So some of the important gases for emission nebulae are hydrogen, especially the H-alpha line at 656 nanometers, doubly ionized oxygen at 500, and ionized sulfur way out in the deep red at 672. And in the best sort of showpiece emission nebulae, these three different filters each have a very different response that allows you to get very dynamic false color images out of them. Okay, but going back to this slide, if you look up at the top of the graph, you can see I've marked where the emission lines are. And basically, any light pollution filter, it doesn't matter which one you're using, whether it's a CLS, a dual narrowband, a single line narrowband, they're concerned with these emission lines. They don't want to block those, but they are fine with blocking almost anything else. And so you're blocking a bunch of unwanted light and its associated noise. And so that really does help improve contrast because the sky darkens, but all of the light from the emission nebulae lines are still quite bright. So you really can improve contrast this way. And so, like anything in this hobby, trade-off with a filter like this is you just get one big, but it's inexpensive. It's a CLS filter goes for like between $70, $150, something like that. While the narrower you make these sort of band passes, if you go to something like 3 nanometer narrowband filters, those can cost a lot more, anywhere from a few $100s to over $1,000 for a single filter. So they're sort of the ultimate light pollution filter, these narrowband filters, and that's why people like using them on emission nebulae. So, but going back to this question, I think another thing that happens in our community is since these very narrowband filters are the best form of light pollution blocking that you can just buy right off the shelf if you have the money, people then dismiss anything that isn't as effective as that and say they don't work. But it's really not that they don't work. They're working in the exact same way. It's the exact same principle in that you're blocking some source of unwanted light and letting other light come through. It's just that you can do that more effectively the narrower the band passes on the filter. But I really think that we have to get away from saying, oh, just don't bother. They're clearly going to do something, especially if your focus is emission nebula. Now, the other big thing that happened, and I think another reason that people say, oh, well, a CLS filter won't work anymore, is that the city light suppression, what that meant was these mercury vapor and high pressure sodium lamps that were amber colored, yellow and orange and that kind of thing. And they were more specifically amber colored and no other wavelengths of light. Well, now, because of changing technology and energy efficiency and things like that, we're moving to LEDs and for streetlights and other kinds of artificial light. And unfortunately, most of the initial batch of LEDs that went in are broad spectrum white, meaning that they're still shining in this orange color, but now they're also shining in a blue color. So what you get is this more sunlight looking color, and you can clearly see it on the road right there, where the colors look a lot more natural at night with a white LED. But for astronomers and astrophotographers, this is really bad because we no longer have that benefit of not having our O3 washed out by these LED street lamps. And there's not really any super effective solution. And another thing I should say about this is this affects any kind of light pollution filter, including narrowband filters. So just because the CLS was designed with these lamps in mind doesn't mean this move to white LEDs isn't affecting every kind of filter that we put in our image train, including very expensive ones. So I definitely actually noticed this. I was in a city when they were making the change from the older style lamps to the white LEDs, and I noticed with my Astrodon 3 nanometer O3 filter that, you know, overnight when the streetlight changed, that it looked far more washed out after they made this change. So there's no truly effective solution. There's no, I don't, you know, I know that some people are marketing light pollution filters that are effective against LED. It just doesn't make any sense to me, because if you look at the spectrum, most of these LED street lamps are broad spectrum. There's no way to really fight against them other than get away from them. So one thing that ended up happening for me is I would still shoot my HA and S2 from the city, because if you look at where these street lamps emit, these white LEDs, they're not strong out there in the deep red. But for the O3, since it got so washed out, if it was a difficult subject, like something that was really dim, like the Squid Nebula, I would now spend some of my dark sky time on the O3 filter because it was just not worth it for me from the city anymore. Okay. Then I just wanted to say that, you know, this is all sort of just me sort of talking, and, you know, you can believe me or not, but the proof with all of this stuff with filters is in the pudding. And what I mean by that is that you really just want to try these things out for yourself, and it will prove it to you whether or not these different filters work. Because when I went into testing these things on YouTube, I don't know, I saw all these differing opinions about which filters were good, which filters worked, which didn't online. And what I found was that, you know, they all work to varying degrees, but you really just have to try them out to know how they work. And so I have a very dead simple test for testing filters. This is what you want to do. You want to do it on the same night. You want to get out there, and it helps to have a filter drawer. I'm assuming, so this is like with one-shot color. If you have a filter wheel, it's even easier. But this really, filter test is more about if you're doing something with one-shot color camera. And what you do is you pick an object, whatever you're sort of most interested in shooting with this kind of filter. So my opinion is that all of these filters are mostly designed for emission nebulae, as you could see from the presentation. But so that's probably what I would pick to test. But if you want to see how they work on galaxies or other things, go ahead, because like I said, the proof is in the pudding, and you can try these things out yourself. So pick an object. It should be preferably high up in the sky, but that's not, you know, necessary. You can pick something, whatever you want. But just make sure that you have about an hour with the object where it's not sort of going beneath the trees or anything like that. And I usually start with the new filter. So you're going to, you know, pick a sub-exposure time, focus with the new filter, and then shoot for 30 minutes total integration. Remove the filter, And then, of course, your settings might change. You might pick a new sub-exposure time. You're probably going to want to change focus and things like that. But the key thing is just shoot again for 30 minutes total. So you can get a sense of, okay, if I put this much time in with the filter or this much time in with no filter, do I like the results better with the filter or without the filter? So you're going to stack the two results and compare them. And last thing I'll say about this is, if you're just using a stock DSLR, you can just go no filter. If you're using something that's full spectrum, like a astronomy camera, then maybe compare instead light pollution filter with an IR cut filter. But it's basically the same idea. And I have found that you can get really dramatic results with this test. So, I mean, these look sort of very different to me. They're very different photos. You can see, that cluster of stars in the middle, that asterism. So it's clear that they're the same area of sky, but otherwise they look so different because the light pollution filter completely changes what you see. It brings out these red emission nebulae. Well, with no filter, you might say, well, that looks much worse. But I can already see promise with no filter that I know I would never be able to pick up with the light pollution filter. So what I'm talking about here is this is the flaming star nebula down here in the lower left. And with no filter, even though it's only half an hour, I can see that even in Bortle 8, I can start seeing that reflection nebula appear. With the light pollution filter, the red emission is completely drawing it out, and I don't think I would ever be able to bring out that blue reflection nebula. Well, with the no filter result, it's possible. So these kinds of tests, I think, are really good to do to sort of understand what the filter is doing, but also sort of your strategy for when to use filters, what to use filters on, and that kind of thing. So I just have a couple more examples. This one I think was even shorter. I think I just did 10 minutes on each. And so you can see, I think most people would prefer the result on the right because you're seeing more of the Horsehead Nebula, the more full extent of it. But, for me, I might actually look at this and say, wow, there's a lot more color variety with no filter. I can see this blue reflection nebula under the Horsehead. I like how the Flame Nebula looks better. I can see more star color. So maybe with this object, it actually makes more sense for me just to focus on no filter. The other thing that I think this demonstrates that maybe the answer, if you're using a DSLR and filters, is a combination of the two. That you can get the benefit of sort of both worlds. So you can shoot a bunch with the light pollution filter and get this strong HA emission, and then shoot a bunch with no filter and combine the two. In the mono world, this is quite common. We have HA RGB compositions. So I think that it's a little less common in one-shot color, but demonstrations like this sort of show to me that it might make a lot of sense. And then I just wanted to show, sometimes I'm surprised by what I get back based on just sort of looking at a chart, because when I looked at a chart for this light pollution filter, it looked like it was passing all of the blue light, right? So it was cutting off starting in the green. So it was basically a notch filter and then coming back up in the red. So I would expect, something like a blue reflection nebula would be just as strong with the light pollution filter, but it wasn't. So sometimes, testing is very beneficial because it will show you something that you might not expect from just looking at charts and data. I think that's it. Yeah, so I wanted to keep it short and sweet. Hopefully that was helpful, though, and I'm happy to answer any questions. I didn't really go into specific filters or things like that, but if anyone has questions about specific filters, I'd be happy to answer them.
All right, nice, Nico. Thank you so much for that. We got a couple of things in the chat. One of the most commented ones is Nico. If you could just hit like the little
Oh yeah,
computer screen to so we
yeah.
can see you. And let's see, damn Nico. There we go. One of the things in the chat is that apparently the chat is kind of derailed a little bit, and they're blaming it on your soothing voice.
Oh yeah.
So they're comparing it to a bunch of, actually there is a question from English Fires out there that says, what do you think of the IDAS NVZ filter?
I haven't tried it. I know that is one of those ones that claims it's good against LED lighting, and again, that doesn't really make much sense to me, because if you look at a typical white LED lighting spectrum, it doesn't, you can't really target against it. It's a broad emitter. The different LED lights may peak at different wavelengths, but they all are pretty much filling the spectrum. That's how they get that sort of natural sunlight kind of response. So there's not really a filter you can design that can target anything. So I haven't tried the MBZ, but I'd be interested. I definitely want to do another sort of light pollution filter shootout at some point, because the last time I did it, I don't think the MBZ was out yet.
Yeah, that was the last one with Queeve, right?
Yes.
Yes, that's a great video. If you haven't seen the video of the light pollution shootout, it's unbelievable with Nico and Queeve. That's a really good comparison shots. If you want to borrow an IDAS, I do have one, so I'll be happy to send it to you if you want it, because I'm not using it right now. I'm doing some other stuff. So if you want to borrow it, you're more than welcome to it.
Oh, sure. Thanks, man.
Yeah, no problem. What else we got? What UV IR filter can you recommend?
I am a huge fan of the Astronomic L2. I use that in like almost all of my different DSLRs and different things. The Astronomic is cool because for the IR cut filters, they have the L1, the L2, and the L3 with just sort of different amounts of light let in, depending on your system. But for most cases, I find the L2, which is the one in the middle, is just perfect.
Nice. We got another one from Gideon. When you use a UV-IR cut filter versus a light pollution filter, what Bortle scale would you use it for? I'm in a Bortle 5.6 and use an IVIR on a 183 MC Pro. Would an LPS filter generate a better result in my case, do you think?
For most objects, I would say Bortle 5.6, I would stick with the IR cut filter. When you're getting into Bortle 8.9, if you're going after emission nebulae with an Astro camera, then I think it makes sense to move to some kind of light pollution filter, whether it's a dual narrowband or whatever it is. But from Bortle 5.6, that's sort of like that cutoff area where I think it probably for most objects makes sense just to go with what you've been doing.
All right, we got one more question. Wait a second. Not sure, Newman, what that means. I'm sorry. I see the question, but I don't know. I don't see a question there. But just do me a favor and redo that, maybe. Does anybody know what the new purplish LED emits at? I didn't know there was a purplish one.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
I would assume it's towards the 700-ish area, but that's I don't know. I've never seen a blue. That's a shocking question to me. So maybe that's in somewhere. I don't know where in the world that is. Let's see. That's Captain 404. He's in the U.S., so I don't know. Maybe they're starting to put some new LEDs out there. Everyone's got questions all over the place. What are we talking about? But anyway, what time we got? We do have a couple of giveaways, so you can catch up with that really quick. And wait for some more questions. But let's see. Right now we have more Masters of Pixinsight giveaways. And let's see. We're going to give away 2 2 MO Master Pixinsight 50% off. Here we go. And we got Jared Roberts. And we got one more. Congratulations, Jared. And last one is George Billisix, I guess. George Billisix. Oh, awesome. Congratulations, guys. Let me see if we got any more questions on there really quick for you. No more questions. So, Nico, hold on. I think I lost your audio there for a second. Is that me? Nope, you're there. Okay. Nico, thank you so much for the presentation on the light pollution and different filters and what they're used for. I appreciate all of the support that everybody has given, and thank you so much for coming on the show and being a part of this event, because it's crazy. It's what is it? It's only 2 hours in. We got another 6 hours to go, but it's going to be cool. So if you want to come and hang out later on, feel free. Let me know. Just throw me an email or a text. And thank you so much, Nico. I appreciate it.
Sure. Yeah, it's my pleasure. Yeah, I'll see what I can do and just maybe at least go into the comment section.
Yeah, absolutely. You can just slam away at the chat, and that'd be great.
All right. Good luck with everything, Dan.
Awesome. Thank you again, Nico. I appreciate it. Have a good day.
You too.
All right.